So we'll go back to item number 6, and Accessible City, revised first phase transport projects, consideration of Kilmore and Salisbury Street enhancements. Staff could come to the table. When this was last in front of us, we asked staff to go away and do some more work, particularly around the Kilmore and Salisbury Street area, well, particularly around Salisbury Street, given the skirt works that are occurring there at the moment. So if I could just ask staff to lead us. Yeah?
Sorry, I probably should have said this earlier. It's no biggie, but I should probably declare that I'm renting a place at least for another month that's on Salisbury Street.
You live in Salisbury Street?
Currently, but I'm actually, yeah.
No, it's all right. They're giving you notice to quit, have they?
I don't own it, and I'm moving to Glendoby Road in less than a month.
I don't regard that as a conflict.
I don't think it's a conflict, but I just thought I should let everyone know.
That's all right. Nice to know where you live. Party at your place tonight. Anyway, so if I could perhaps hand over to you, Richard, and you could take us through the report.
Shall I introduce everyone, please?
Yes.
My name is Richard Osborne, Unit Manager, Transport and Research. To my left is Terry Howes, who I'm sure needs no introduction. And to my right is Tim Cheeseborough, who's a Senior Transport Planner in the City Environment Group.
Good afternoon.
So if I could just introduce the report briefly. We had an initial report to the Earthquake Recovery Committee of the Whole, and essentially what that sought to do was to change slightly the first phase transport projects which are outlined in an accessible city and the cost share agreement. And the main reason for those recommended changes was to support the early anchor projects, predominantly the bus interchange, which is scheduled to open in April 2015. And really what we want to do is ensure, particularly Chewham Street, that it is opened as a one-way eastbound road all the way to the interchange, so buses can use that to access it. Also change Litchfield Street from a one-way to a two-way minor distributor street, and do some works around the, particularly around the public open space adjacent to the interchange itself, because obviously there's going to be a lot of people coming in and out.
Need to ask the question, is that one lane, one way only to the bus interchange going west to east? Because I may have a conflict of interest if it goes further.
It would be.
Why would it be? Sorry.
Because my brother has a business in Chewham Street.
No,
Family
don't.
business.
I'm ruling out, businesses and homes on.
Well, he'll be
street.
a big objector, I'll tell you that right now.
Eh?
He'll be a big opposer of it in consultation, that's all.
It's not going out for consultation.
Okay.
It's the Accessible City chapter of the Central City Recovery Plan. It's already in place. Yeah.
So council, should I kick on?
Yeah.
Sorry, just jumped in there. The resolution was that council supported the changes but wanted essentially staff to provide some further options for keeping Kilmore Street in the first phase transport projects, and we'd basically recommended that the bulk of the works for Kilmore be deferred to the second phase, as well as introducing Salisbury Street. Now, Salisbury Street was not part of the first phase transport projects, so essentially we were asked to go away and look at that. So that we've prepared a supplementary report, which is before you at the moment. The report has 4 options in it. One of the options, and perhaps if you turn to page 4 and 5 of the supplementary report, they're outlined in there. The first option is to pay for bringing Salisbury Street into the first phase transport projects and retaining Kilmore Street as a first phase transport project, as well as to defer Manchester Street, defer Cambridge Terrace works, essentially to find a whole lot of new money, $15 million odd, or option 4, which is the preferred staff or recommended option from staff, which is to do some initial works on Salisbury Street to ensure that the work currently being done by Skirt does not have to be replaced. So that's the option recommended by staff. We think, if you look to page 6 of the supplementary report, table 1, what we've done is assess those various options against the key impacts we were considering. And certainly the option that we came up with, which was preferable, was add some enabling works on Salisbury Street, not to defer any of the other works which were currently within the first phase, such as Cambridge Terrace or Manchester Street, and not to retain those, but basically increase the overall scope of the first phase transport projects, which would be around circa $15 million to do so.
All right. So, Yanni?
I'm sort of having a lot of concern that initially when we asked about Salisbury Street, we were told that I think those enabling works were already happening. Now we're being told we need another 100,000 and we've got skirt going in there. So it seems to me one of the critical issues is how can we align skirt work to the accessible transport city work? Can we get a report back over where the opportunity is? I'm just really concerned that, we've got a huge financial problem. We can't afford to be doing things twice, and yet in the central city, this seems to be what's going on. So, short of bringing Salisbury Street forward, which you've told will cost 15 million, is there any other way in which we can align the skirt repair to the road reconstruction so that we don't spend the same amount of money twice?
Through you, Madam Chair, that's what we're proposing. And the key thing, what we want to do is skirt, you're right, skirt are already in there doing some work, and to ensure that doesn't need to be reworked, we're getting them to put, well, Tim can probably explain better than me because he's closer to it, but put some of the lane markings in, and also put some of the ducting in for when it does change from one way to two way, so you don't need to go in and rehash all that work that they're doing at the moment. So,
kind of puzzles me why that wasn't happening already.
Through you, Madam Chair, the objective of aligning to skirt work, exactly as Councillor Johansson has asked, is to minimise any abortive costs. Skirt are getting on well, they're making good progress, and as members will no doubt be aware, the carriageway reconstruction works on Salisbury Street are already well advanced. What we're ensuring is that the additional costs, primarily when you convert two-way on Salisbury Street, we will need to alter the intersections. So the signals that are for one-way traffic at the moment will need to be two-way, and Salisbury Street carries a separated cycleway within it. So it's a fairly fundamental change to the overall look and operational nature of Salisbury Street. Well, one of the reasons we can't simply accommodate all of the Salisbury Street works in the current skirt repair works is that in order to put the separated cycleways in there, we need to consult the community and the board over necessary removal of parking from one side of the street or the other. So that's a fairly significant change which will affect the utility of the street. So that is an option in terms of how we deliver the improvement works on Salisbury Street in order to put a fully separated cycleway in there. Kilmore Street doesn't carry a key cycle route through the centre of the city, so the works there are somewhat simpler for us to minimise those abortive works. But the bulk of the cost on both streets, I perhaps need to clarify, the $15 million is for doing both of those streets to two-way operation. The bulk of the costs is at the intersections along those streets, which could cost up to $500,000 per intersection to treat. There are 7 on Salisbury and 6 on Kilmore, and of course then the extra work to introduce the separated cycleway on Salisbury Street, plus the landscaping works along there.
I think Yanni's point was, though, you have to dig up the street twice, which is a terrible inconvenience for the residents.
We would seek to minimise inevitably there will be some further work needed on Salisbury and Kilmore Streets. That's inescapable. in order for the skirt work to carry on moving ahead on its current timetable. What we are seeking to do, however, is to minimise the level of disruption and abortive expenditure.
But why do we need Skirt doing their work now if this other work's going to be done? Wouldn't it be better to do it at the same time?
Well, I think the problem we have, we've got a road surface that's been damaged, and if we want to put it back in the short term, Skirt is the way to do that. At the moment, the Kilmore and the Salisbury projects will be part of further discussions between the council and the Crown, so we don't know what the timeframes for that are exactly going to be yet.
Like I guess if we do nothing, we potentially could be waiting 20 years to two-way Salisbury Street. There's no funding in the budget. We've got huge financial issues. Is this another kind of negotiation with government, like the Skirt infrastructure? What was the process for determining when Salisbury Street would be done before this report came?
So in terms of Salisbury Street was never in the first phase transport projects.
No.
So what we're doing is what we call a program business case for the rest of Inaccessible City. So everything which isn't in the first phase, we're doing a business case, and that's what NZTA and the government basically ask us to do. So we're putting that together at the moment, and if you look at the last recommendation, 6.5, it reads basically what we're seeking to do is promote Kilmore and Salisbury Street to the top of that list to ensure that they are the ones, and we think there's good justification for doing that from a transport and other perspective.
Could we sneak the other one-way streets in there without them noticing?
I think we might be struggling on that, Madam Chair, but
You could try.
we'll try a few cheeky track changes maybe. So I can't give you a time frame for that because ultimately that will be a decision of council. We're going to basically do the program business case now, then it'll come back and have to be considered as part of the long-term plan.
The point I was really trying to understand is there's no money in the current budget and there's no money being agreed with government.
No.
So given the financial situation that we're in, it's pretty unlikely that this is going to happen. So, I think...
Is there additional funding from central government to assist with these projects? Or
That's part of the business case process that's going through,
Right.
and that will be part of the discussions probably in a couple of months' time around how that gets funded. And
so that wasn't finalised in the cost share agreement?
No, nothing was fine. Only the first phase projects were identified.
It just seems to me, and we've got two reports.
That we should ask the government for all the money for it.
Well, it just seems bizarre that, well, not bizarre, but I think in terms of what's happening with anchor projects, there's not certainty about the anchor projects. Schedules have been behind. The Metro Sports is a year extended for a year. We've got issues around the proposed stadium. We've got other issues in terms of private development happening in the central city. I'm sort of getting to a point where I don't have a lot of confidence that the old accessible transport plan, even the first phase, matches the new reality of what's happening in the central city, both publicly and privately. So, I almost wonder whether we actually need to have a meeting and a workshop and try and work through what we've got in terms of Skirt, what we've got in terms of accessible transport, what we've got in regards to the anchor projects,
the parking
and
plan,
parking, and then work out what are the priorities with what we know with our financial situation and the new dynamic in terms of that shared governance structure.
I think that's a very good idea. So, but I mean, that doesn't need to hold us up with this today, but it does. I actually agree with Yanni. I think part of the problem is that, I mean, and it's maybe me being a little bit newer to the role than Yanni, but I kind of don't feel like that there's a helicopter view on this issue. Like we're engaged at different points on some of these projects, but not engaged so clearly on others. And
I think the problem is that the way the cost share separated out purely the first phase and left the rest for further discussions and further work, and it's effectively become disjointed. And what we're trying to pick it up, Councillor Hanson's point, that we do know that the anchor project around the bus interchange is progressing, and there's
Yes,
a time frame
it
around
is.
that. So we've tried to align this first phase to support that as best we can, hence our recommendations to do that. But it does mean there's another conversation to be had about that second phase and third phase and fourth phase projects.
But what's missing is skirt. You know, it's almost like we've contracted out everything, you know, like it's the decision making as well as the priorities, as well as, you know, and I mean, I understand that the prioritisation exercise will come back to us, but it's like all of this work is carrying on at pace, and it doesn't feel joined up to these other things. You know, it was the point that people made about allowing for building consents to be issued while the government was still doing the Central City Recovery Plan. While it was still doing that plan, I mean, that's how you end up with the first building being rebuilt after the earthquakes, being the first one to come down, you know, sort of because of the accessible city widening of Manchester Street, you know, the West End building. You know, I mean, that sort of thing is avoidable if you've got a holistic helicopter view, but I don't feel like I've got that in the CBD.
Yeah, that probably might be something to do with ourselves, but also because we've got a number of players in that area trying to juggle things. But I can assure you that Skirt are totally interlinked with the work we're doing around the Accessible City Chat. We actually talk to them week in, week out. So, for instance, they've done all the work around the sewer repairs in Tooham Street. So all the roads that we want to do, they've already been in or are in at the moment, repairing the underground infrastructure to enable those roads to then be finished off. In terms of Salisbury Street, it wasn't in the first phase projects. Therefore, we make a decision, do we not do anything with Salisbury Street and leave it pretty wrecked, and wait at some point in the future for a project to come. We made the call, well, we've got to do something to tidy it back up, because we have no certainty of when that date's going to be. Yeah. So I can assure you we are working very closely.
I'm sure you've got the umbrella view, I haven't. So.
Clearly we're not portraying that very well.
No, but I think having a workshop to actually work through all of these issues, and I don't know why, but I kind of like a map, and I like to see what's happening where, when,
and we have
how,
those.
and why. Yeah.
And we have those.
Yeah.
Have you got a map with private development as well? Because it just seems to me that the other risk is that you've got a retail precinct which seems to be evolving every other week. There's a new story about what's happening or what's not happening. And it just, I think the private development is equally as important.
No,
because
I agree. I totally agree with you. I mean, I spoke to that, was it Richard Diver, who's done all the development down Victoria Street. So there's a big apartment complex going into the old Ecan site. I know that car parking's part of that. I've spoken to others who've got private car parking solutions that they want to put on the table. And if that's the case, and we think of this in the context of our parking obligations within the Accessible City chapter and the planning that we're doing there, it might be a good idea to try and join all of this up. I mean, for our sake, if you could work together to put together a presentation that draws all of those threads together, including the private sector, because, Mr. Teelan, would you like to contribute?
Thank you. Pending your decision around the amount of time you need for your annual plan presentation, so I think on the 19th we have a proposed presentation on the retail precinct and the parking plan, and specifically our parking obligation. So that question is coming, the question you're posing is coming back to you next week by way of a workshop.
And will that include the private sector developments?
To the degree that we know what private sector developments are in the offing, yes, we can make reference to those. Unfortunately, we don't always know what individuals are wanting to do, and their plans do change quite quickly, but to the degree that we understand those, or that we can get that sort of intelligence also from our colleagues at Sarah, then we will certainly include that for you.
Yeah. I mean, well, building consents, I'm sure applications, early meetings might be a good source of intelligence. Yes. The pre-application meetings.
Yeah, I think what we're trying to do is continue to draw the distinction between our role in public car parking providing and making sure that we're meeting the needs of retail consumers, but also what different developers are doing in terms of providing either for their own tenants
Yeah,
or what they might wish to produce commercially into the market as well.
yeah.
If that's the case, and I think that's great, if we get that on the 19th, then why not just wait for this report until after we've had that briefing presentation so we can see how the dots are joined up?
Well, look, I don't know that this one is particularly relevant to that. This is really about actually, I suppose, working, I think as Terry and Richard have outlined, this one is about saying, to meet the anchor projects as we understand them, we think that actually adjusting the first phase to address Salisbury Street is quite critical. We know that government do have and are working up their business case for their year 2 and year 3, or phase 2 and 3 proposal. So that is a work in train, and we're happy to give you some information on that as well if we can.
But
That is an active program.
But we don't know, and so you're adding $15 million.
No, we're not. At the moment, we're suggesting no.
No, sorry. And on page 21, you're adding 4.5, 3.9, 3.8, and 0.4, and I presume another $4 million for super stops. So it's about $15 million that's been added to the program. Now, there's things going on that we can't obviously talk about in here that are happening in those areas. So it just seems ludicrous that we would, this is $72 million.
72 million's
funding.
the existing funding on both.
Existing funding.
Exactly, but this is about prioritising which projects go ahead first.
From that 72
So within that 72.
But they're already in the cost share agreement, except for the ones that we're changing.
Exactly, the ones that are being added. So there might be other projects that we wish to add on the information that we know, or there might be different outcomes that we desire based on the information that we know since the cost share was agreed to, that changed the priority. But until we get that presentation, we have no way of being able to discuss that.
Is there anything else that would change any of these?
No, I think what we've tried to change is including the one-way to Street as the proposal in the first phase so that it supports the interchange facility. That the whole of Toome Street one way was not included in the first phase, and it's critical that it all is as part of this first phase project.
Yeah, I mean that's exactly one of the streets that worries me, and I mean
Which one?
Toome Street, because actually based on some developments, you might actually want to keep it two-way. It could be a major, access way from the east, but for some of the other things that are going on. If you have a stadium in its current location, or if you're not going to do it for a number of years, then it might not be critical to do it straight away. That's the sort of thing, the big picture stuff, we need to consider. And if we're agreeing to just do it one way now, ahead of that, just for the bus interchange, which is one project, when we've got other projects happening all around that have changed since this was done, I'm really concerned. The final question I just wanted to ask, even if we agree to these and we bring these forward, what sort of public engagement consultation will there be? So Toome Street, take Toome Street for example, are local businesses that are affected, do they have an opportunity to submit whether they want it two-wayed or one-wayed? Or, people in Salisbury, Kilmore Street, what chance do they have to say, actually, we think you should keep Kilmore Street in the first phase, or you should take it all out and do it in 20 years?
These have already been decided, though.
It's
They're in the Accessible City chapter. They're land use recovery plan. We have to change our plan to. We can't have a plan that's inconsistent with this.
Not for like this would actually be amendments to the first phase, so it's part of the cost share that we're changing.
Yeah,
not the
that's all.
accessible transport.
It's got. Yeah, I know, but we're not changing the plan. The Central City Recovery Plan is a legal plan under the Canterbury Earthquake Recovery Act, and it has status which requires that we have nothing that is inconsistent with it. Our plan cannot be inconsistent with the Central City Recovery Plan. We wouldn't consult on the terms of the cost share agreement because the previous council had entered into it. It was concluded. All we're doing is changing the order that we do things.
Normally, if you're going to...
You are quite correct, because the accessible city and the recovery plan has already stipulated that Toome Street becomes a one-way street
That's right.
in replace of Litchfield.
Having said that, Madam Chair, we still need to go through a full public process
Yes.
for that, in accordance with the Local Government Act provisions, and the intention of this, if you look at 6.3, is to get approval from councillors to go out to full public and stakeholder engagement over the design concepts for these first phase projects, and that'll probably be about a period of a month, where we seek feedback on a variety, all these projects which are in here. There may need to be something which is akin to a special consultative procedure. So it'll be a full consultation exercise where people will have the opportunity to have their say.
But at the end of the day, we're hamstrung by the decision of the...
Yeah. The consultation.
Oh,
will
no,
be-
well, hang on, are we? I mean,
Yes.
I mean, effectively what we're doing, I mean, our consultation isn't fundamentally about whether we do them or not. It is about
How we do
how we do them and how they look and feel. When I look down this list, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. We're not changing, I suppose, the cost share, we're not changing the accessible city chapter. What we are doing is pragmatically saying, what is the best mix of projects? Because the $72 million was a little bit of it wasn't a sort of a wish list, but it took the knowledge it had at the time. We're now trying to best, I suppose, work with Sarah to say, how do we best spend that $72 million to support what the government said the first phase was about, which was supporting the key anchor projects. And in that context, the key anchor projects that we're really trying to support are the bus exchange, which is the hub of our transport network, and I suppose the hospital redevelopment, which is also...
And the Avon River.
And Avon River.
So it does feel a little bit like juggling, but that's what we're doing, I think, in a practical way. We're just trying to juggle that as best we can to deliver the best outcome with the money that has been approved, knowing that we are also working with Mr. Blyleven and his people in the back there to actually put together their business case to government for their next two phases of funding.